A Cornish Tale. Enis Tregarthen. Bucca's Little Merry Men. Illustrated by John Dukes McKee. Nearly everybody in Mevagissey had heard of Bucca, the Neptune of the Cornish Sea, and how he had commanded his 9 little mermen to row in their longboat to a large rock pool near one of Mevagissey's high cliffs. There, cormorants and gulls nested, and a rare weed called the Weed of Health grew. The Mevagissey people had also heard that whoever was lucky enough to see the wonderful little boat, curved like a moon on her back, and bring her inside Mevagissey quay would bring luck to himself and the whole fishing town. No one believed the old Whittle any more except Merlin Legasic, an ancient fisherman, and his great-grandfather had seen such a boat come into the basin, but as he was crippled in his legs, he could not climb up the slippery sides of the rock, and so lost the chance of getting the little craft and bringing her into the quay. This old Whittle had made a great impression on the younger Merlin, and it was the one desire of his heart to see the little boat his great-great-grandfather had seen, so he watched for her coming at each flow of the tide. In those days the people of the Mevagissey were all fisher-folk and exceedingly poor, owing to the scarcity of fish. Most of them knew, more often than not, the pangs of hunger. Old Merlin Legasic and his children and grandchildren were some of the worst sufferers, as they were a large family, and, being so many to share the little food there was, they had often to go supperless to bed. As the fishing grew worse and worse, Merlin the elder and Merlin the younger longed more and more for the coming of the little boat into Bucca's basin, for it would turn the luck of the fishing from bad to good if only one of them could see her there and get hold of her. But, in spite of all their watching and longing, she had not yet come into the pool. The younger Merlin was beginning to despair of her ever coming at all. The elder Merlin was often a bit down in the mouth too, only he would not allow it, and cheered his little grandson by telling him that she was bound to put into the basin sometime, adding impressively, "'Tis a prize worth waiting for, even if she don't come till you be as old and grey-headed as your grandfa." Neither Merlin went fishing. The old man was too feeble and the boy too young, but the former mended the fishing nets, and the little lad got the bait to supply the hooks. Late one afternoon in the beginning of June, with their melodies and Mevagissey cliffs were a sight to see, when the larks were thrilling the blue air with the pink of the thrifts and the red and gold of the ladies' fingers, old Merlin sent his namesake to Polstreath Beach to dig sprats in the great stretch of the sand there. As the lad was leaving the cottage on the cliffside, the grandsire begged him to keep an extra lookout for the dinky longboat. "'Tis such handsome weather," he said, "and the sea from Rames Head to Chapel Point is like a mill pond most. Whichever way the little merry men be pleased to come, they will be able to get into the bay as easy as any of our own boats." Old Merlin's manner was so eager and his voice so earnest that the boy, instead of going to Polstreath as he was bidden, went to Bucca's basin. When he got there, the tide had not yet reached the rock where the pool was, but it was flowing fast toward it. The sea was rougher than his grandfather had allowed him to expect, and waves were breaking against the northern cliffs, which were by far the boldest in the bay. "The wee chaps and their dinky longboat won't come today, that's certain," said the boy to himself, a look of disappointment on his bright young face as he stood gazing seaward. "If they don't make haste, grandfa and me won't be alive to watch, for we shall soon die of hunger, and all the other folk in Mevagissey will too." The words were hardly out of his mouth when a laugh from somewhere close to him stole upon his ear. At first he thought it was the giggle of a kittiwake, which often laughs as it flies over the cliffs, but as it was followed by a chorus of tiny voices singing, he knew it could not be. Much wondering what it was, young Merlin listened intently, and as he listened it dawned upon him that it might be Bucca's little merry men come into the basin at last. No sooner had this idea taken possession of his mind than he climbed up the side of the rock and peeped into the pool. There, to his unspeakable delight, was a tiny boat not much bigger than a child's toy and curved like a moon on her back. The little craft was full of tiny men with scarlet caps on their dark heads, for all the world like inverted sea anemones. Jumpers clung tight to their slim figures which, when they moved, were all sparkle and colour like a mackerel's back. "'Tis the boat I've been on the lookout for all this time," young Merlin said joyfully to himself as he watched her riding on the swirling water under the shadow of the basin's side. "And my chance is come at last to bring good luck to Mevagissey and the fishing." As he said this, wondering how he could get hold of the tiny craft, all the little men began laughing and chaffing each other. Then one of them broke out into a rollicking song with a chorus in which they all joined. "With a dally-rally-o, with a rally-dally-o, in their longboat-o." Merlin, as he listened, could scarcely refrain from joining in, too. The air was so catching and as fresh as the breeze blowing in from the sea. When they had finished their song, they gripped the oars and began to row the boat across the pool to where Merlin was looking over it, motionless as the basin itself. Merlin held his breath as she came, waiting to grip her when she got under the basin's brim. The dinky crew were so intent on their rowing that they did not notice the brown handsome face of the lad who was watching them. When the boat was within a yard or so from where Merlin was sitting, the little man at the helm suddenly pointed to something glowing like flame under the rim of the basin. "It is the weed of health," he cried. "So it is," responded all the little men, suspending their slender oars to gaze at the burning weed. "How are we to get it?" asked one anxiously. "That's the question," replied the helmsman. "If I can measure distance with my eye, I'm afraid it is far out of outreach." "In that case our coming here is all in vain," said one of the crew in a dismal voice. "Our Bucca will never be himself again, and that horrid Beau will sit on the great pearl throne instead." "It's as terrible to think of," said another. "If only we had legs made for climbing, as those great men-creatures have who live in yonder town," he sighed, turning his face in the direction of Mevagissey. "Do not look at the black side of things until you are so obliged," the helmsman commented severely. "Let's go and have a closer view," piped a little voice. "It may not be so unget at Ubble as we fear." When Merlin saw the boat turn round and make for the spot where the weed was burning as bright as a field of poppies, he pulled himself back very gently and crept round to where the little craft was close in the basin's wall. As soon as he dared peep over the pool, he saw that the little merry men were looking anything but merry. Gazing at each other in silent dismay, they sat for 5 minutes or more, when a voice broke the silence with a cry of hope. "Why, how stupid we are! The sea will flow into the basin soon after sundown, and the basin will be so full of water that it will be easy to reach the beautiful weed. You forget that the weed blossom and ripens only 2 hours before the sun posts westward," said the steersman sadly, "and it is within half an hour of that time now." "I had forgotten that," the small man murmured, "and we must therefore give up all hope of taking back the weed of health to our dear Bucca," piped another little voice, wished as the cry of a gull proclaiming a storm. "We shall never dare show our faces in Bucca town without the weed," said an oarsman, shaking his scarlet-capped head. "I, for one, could not bear to see the despair in Bucca's eyes, nor the look of triumph in Beau's. We must have known when we sailed away to this place that the weed of health was growing where we feetless little men could never get it." When Merlin, who was a feeling-hearted little chap, heard what Bucca's 9 merry men said, he felt sorry for them and almost lost sight of his own troubles in theirs. The moment, however, they stopped talking and sat looking at each other, the thought of the hungry ones in Mevagissey came over him. Telling himself that now was his opportunity to bring good luck to everybody in the little fishing town, he crooked his bare feet in the outer rim of the basin and let himself gently down its seaweed-covered side. As he hung head downward his full length and was stretching out his hands to grasp the boat, one of her crew looked up and saw him. He uttered a cry of warning, and in a moment of time the boat and her crew were far from the boy's outflung hands. Merlin pulled himself up from his undignified position amid roars of laughter from the 9 little merry men. "You thought you had got us nicely, didn't you?" asked the helmsman, doffing his bright cap in derision. "Perhaps you will be a bit slower in your movement the next time Bucca's merry men in their longboat come into the basin." "I can get you now if I like," cried Merlin, who was a quick-tempered lad and did not at all like the way the little cock-a-hoop spoke to him. "I can dive like a shag and swim like a fish, and if I dive down there into the pool I can get you quite easily. It was only the fear of upsetting your little craft and drowning ye all that stopped me. There now." The 9 little merry men seemed vastly amused at the boy's boast and laughed till the salt tears rolled down their faces. "It is quite too funny," cried one, wiping his eyes on the hem of his jumper. "Yes, isn't it?" cried a knot. Fancy his being afraid of our drowning," and again they roared with laughter. "'Tis no laughing matter," shouted Merlin, who was red as a boiled crab with anger. "I'll spring into the pool now and get ye." "Do," taunted the helmsman, who was evidently the spokesman of the longboat crew and a person of some importance. "But I think you will have as much difficulty in laying hold of our boat as you would of its reflection." "I'll come all the same," cried the boy, diving into the pool as he spoke. When Merlin came to the top of the water, the little craft was nowhere to be seen. After swimming about in the basin looking for the lost boat under all the seaweed and into every hole where he thought it was possible for so tiny a craft to hide, he reluctantly came to the conclusion that Bucca's little merry men and their longboat had vanished forever. It was a crestfallen lad that climbed up the basin's side, low-spirited indeed to think that he had had the chance of bringing good luck to his town, and had lost it to his hasty temper and boasting. Like the merry men, he felt he could not go home and face his family and friends after missing such a splendid opportunity. As he sat on the basin's brim with his bare legs dangling over, feeling as miserable as a gull with its wings clipped, a gurgle broke on his ear, just the sort of gurgle that had made him think of the laugh of the kittiwake half an hour before. It came up from the pool, and looking down, Merlin saw to his amazed delight the tiny longboat and its crew in their scarlet caps and shining jumpers. They were in the very spot where they had so strangely disappeared. "So you are not so clever as you thought you were," chorused the little merry men in voices which sounded like a company of hedge sparrows chirping. "No," said the boy honestly, "I ain't, and what is worse still, I'm afraid now I shall never get hold of ye and bring good luck to our fishing." "Whatever do you mean?" So Merlin told them all about the strange riddle, finishing up by saying that he supposed it wasn't a bit true, and that the poor folks of Mevagissey would still go to bed with empty stomachs. "Part of the story is true enough, or we would not be here in the basin now," said the helmsman, looking up not unkindly at the boy's sad face. "The rest of the story was born of a despairing hope in a man-creature's brain-pan. I am sorry for you nevertheless," he added after a pause, "but you see it is quite useless to hope that you or anybody could ever bring us and our boat inside of Mevagissey Quay against our will." He took his gaze from the disconsolate lad as he was speaking, and again looked with a longing eyes at the weed almost touching the boy's bare legs. Merlin followed the glance, and, noticing the hopelessness of its expression, a kind thought came into his mind. Leaning over the pool he said, "As it don't seem in my power to bring prosperity to our poor little Mevagissey and make the folks there happy, I'll make you and your Bucca happy instead, if I can." "You? What can you do to make us and our dear Boo happy?" asked all the 9 little men in great amazement. "I heard you talking just now about the weed of health," answered the boy, touching the glowing fronds which, since he had climbed up on the basin's brim and second time, had put forth silvery-looking berries with streaking of crimson and gold. "I heard you say you was in a terrible way, 'cause it grew where you couldn't reach it." The little merry men were listening with all their ears, watching the boy intently. "Well," Merlin went on, "it has just come into my noddle the I can pick it for you, that is, if you will please let me, little misters." "Will you really do that kindness for us and our Boo?" they asked eagerly, hope and delight spreading over their faces. Of course I will," answered the boy. "Tell me when you want it picked, and I'll do it for ye." The 9 little men talked to each other, speaking so low that Merlin couldn't catch a word they said. Besides, he He was too much nature's gentleman and a Cornish man to bend over and listen. They were holding a kind of privy council, and were apparently of one mind, for when they had finished their sat the little oarsmen straightened themselves, and the steersman stood up in the stern of the boat and saluted the boy after the manner of royal boatmen. In the name of His Majesty, Bucca of the Cornish Sea, we gratefully accept your kind offer to gather him the weed of health which we have come so far to get. At the same time we make you an offer under certain condition, and, if you will fulfill them, we will allow you to take us in our longboat inside Mevagissey Quay, and so bring good luck to the fishing there. Do ye really and truly mean what you say? Gasped Merlin, almost tumbling into the pool in his excitement. Yes, really and truly, responded the steersman with a broad grin. But under certain conditions, he nodded again impressively. What be they, little misters? Asked the boy. The conditions are that the moment you have gathered the weed of health and its berries and dropped it into the pool, you will leave here at once. Return to your town or its neighborhood, and there remain until we have rowed up to your quay, which we will do just before the tide turns. Come down to the quay then, and bring the boat inside. Merlin was about to speak, but the steersman went on. In the meantime, he said, you must not tell anybody, not even your parents, of our being here in the basin, or that you have the power to bring good cheer to everybody in your town. Is that all you want me to promise? Asked the boy. I reckon I can do that. Then he added with a broad smile, it will be as easy as walking. Not so easy as you think, said the helmsman gravely. You will be tempted to tell everyone you meet that you have seen Bucca's 9 little merry men in the longboat, and that they have promised you to come up to the quay at the turning of the tide. Remember, if you do tell anyone, your chance of bringing good luck to your town will be gone forever. Another thing we shall warn you against, the little man went on. Should you be tempted, as you probably will, to detain our boat when you have brought us into your quay, you will be in danger of changing the good luck to bad. If you keep us against our will, even for an hour, Bucca will turn all your fishing nets into boulders and your lines into stones. I won't tell the folks for anything if you don't want me to, said Merlin, but I should like to tell my old grandfa, who do take much interest in ye all. It will be dreadful hard not to tell him. Nevertheless, you may not tell even your grandfa until you have taken us into the quay. You may then. But now, the steersman spoke more briskly, if you are willing to gather the weed, please be quick. It is ripe and ought to be plucked at once, both for your sake and for our own. The waves are beginning to dash against the foot of the rock. I forgot the tide, cried Merlin, flinging himself flat on the basin's brim and gathering the scarlet weed with its bright berries. He plucked all there was and dropped it into the pool. Then, as the little merry men were stowing it away in their longboat, he climbed down the basin's side. If he had been 5 minutes later, he would not have been able to get away from the great rock at all, for it was almost surrounded by the sea. Once clear of the rock, Merlin made for Mevagissey. Distantly, he heard the little merry men singing at the top of their voices the song which had so delighted him. Running up the narrow streets of the little town, Merlin found himself singing too, and with as much gusto as the merry men. Everyone he met asked what was the matter with him, and Merlin had, as the steersman foretold, the greatest difficulty in the world to keep from telling that he had seen with his own eyes Bucca's little merry men in their longboat, and of all the luck and cheer the town was going to have. When he reached home, his grandfather quickly saw that something out of the ordinary had happened to the boy, and plied him with questions. Merlin would have answered the old man's question gladly, but he dared not because of what helmsman had said to him. To prevent himself from letting out all there was to tell, he contorted his face so that his grandsire thought he was either making faces at him on purpose, of that he really had seen the longboat in the rock pool, and let go his chance of bringing her up to the quay. Old Merlin threatened the boy that if he did not let him hear all there was to hear, he would give him the rope's end. "You have bewitched the child with your nonsense about Bucaboo's little boat coming into our bay," struck in the lad's mother after looking at her son. "Shame to ye, Grandfer Legasick." When the angry old man insisted that it was his belief the boy had seen the longboat and wouldn't tell, young Merlin, to escape further questioning, took to his heels and made for the top of the hill above the town, where he knew his grandfather could not follow him. The sun was sinking behind Mevagissey by this time, and all the beauty of the evening sky was reflected in the quiet waters of the bay. The whole harbour was lovely with reflected light, and even the northern cliffs shone with gold. As the sun sank lower and lower, the fishing boats came up the bay, catching the light on their weather-stained sails. The lads watched the boats moving towards the quay, and as they came he saw the women and children go down on the quay walls to welcome them back, and to see if they had a good catch of fish. But Merlin could tell by the very movement of the people that the fishermen's luck had been bad again. "I'm glad as a bird that I didn't let out to anybody, nor to Grandfer Nuther, that I saw the dinky longboat in Bucaboo's basin," said the lad to himself as his brown eyes followed the people on their homeward way. "For now there won't be any more starving folks in Mevagissey town after tonight, when I shall have brought the little craft and all her merry men into our quay." He clapped his hands for the joy of it, then clapped them over his mouth lest he should be heard. "Ah, I wonder what Grandfer and all of 'em will say to me," he went softly to himself, "when they have heard what I have seen with my own 2 eyes and done with my own 2 hands, and that I, Merlin Legasick, have brought good luck to the fishing and good cheer to the people in our town." He laughed aloud at the thought of it. The sun had dropped behind the hill by this time, but the clouds that stretched across the sky from Mevagissey to Gorenchurch town still held the sunlight. When the sun had set and the afterglow had all gone, and the little town, lying low in the valley below where Merlin sat, grew indistinct in the semi-darkness, the lad got up and went down the hill. Mevagissey people went early to bed, and the narrow, twisting streets were very quiet as the lad made his way through them. His own people had nothing cheering to make them want to sit up. The catch of fish was usually bad, not more than 1 small fish to a boat, and they all felt very miserable. Saying bed was the best place for starving people. To bed the Legasick had gone, leaving the door on the latch for Merlin. When the lad reached home he found even his old grandfather abed and apparently fast asleep, much to his thankfulness, for there was no one to ask him troublesome questions. It was yet a good while to the ebb of the tide, but Merlin was loath to go to sleep, fearing he should not wake in time. He shared his room with several of his brothers, and as he lay listening to their heavy breathing, a terrible misgiving took possession of him that Bucaboo's little merry men had tricked him. The idea made him so miserable that he got into his clothes and crept out into the little street. He had no sooner left the house than a pair of old eyes looked out of the window, watching eagerly to see what way the boy would go. Once out on the street, Merlin raced down to the quay and arrived there breathless. It was later than he thought, for a clock in the distance was striking the hour, and Merlin knew that the tide had already turned. There was still a great deal of ground swell on outside the little haven, but inside, where all the fishing boats were riding in safety, it was like a lake. The boy purred anxiously over the quay, but he could see nothing save the water heaving against its stone walls. "I don't believe they meant to come when they sent me off like that," the boy cried aloud. "'Twas a dirty trick to play on a poor little chap like me. I would ha' kept my word." "And we have kept ours," cried a little voice sweet and clear as a blackbird's whistle. It was followed by a burst of hearty laughter, and looking down again, Merlin saw on the dark water the longboat and her crew shining like a rising star. "Ah, I am so glad you've come," exclaimed the boy, leaning over the quay wall in a transport of delight. "I was afraid you had gone along home. Shall I come down now and bring the little boat and you into the quay?" "Have you kept your promise?" asked the steersman. "Is faithful," answered the boy. "Then come down and bring Bucaboo's merry men inside Mevagissey quay and win for the fisherfolk prosperity forever." Young Merlin was down the quay's stone stairway in a jiffy. When he was about to lay his hands on the tiny boat and her crew, he paused. Partly from feet and partly because she looked so beautiful. One moment she was a curve of crimson flame seeming to catch the water on fire around her, and the next she was like a rainbow lying on its back. "Don't be afraid to touch the longboat," cried the 9 little merry men. "She'll hurt nobody who plucked the scarlet weed of health. Be quick, please, for there is a faraway sound of an old man walking along the street." For the sake of his beloved town and its people, Merlin took hold of the glowing little boat and brought her safely inside Mevagissey Quay. There she lay, a burning wonder on the quiet water, by the side of his father's fishing boat. "Now," said the helmsman, standing up in the stern of the dinky craft, "speed away to meet the old man and tell him that at last Bucca's little merry men have been brought inside Mevagissey Quay, and that the hand which brought inside her and us has won good luck to Mevagissey fishing forever." "Don't send me away, please, dear little sir," pleaded the boy. "Let me keep the longboat here in the quay till the morning, that the folks may see with their own eyes what a beauty she is with her dinky little oars and all." "Away," said the little man sternly, "unless you wish to undo the blessing you have brought for this place and bring it a curse instead. Remember what we told you." It was hard for Merlin to leave the little craft, which seemed to grow more and more beautiful as he gazed at it. Then he remembered all that he and the poor people in his town had suffered, and made himself withdraw his gaze. Having done that, his passionate desire to detain her left him, and he rushed away to tell his grandfather, whom he saw walking toward him as quickly as his aged feet would let him. "I guessed what was in the wind," said old Merlin, thumping his grandson's back in his joy when he had told him the great news. "And you was a sensible little chap to keep it dark, especially as they little merry men didn't want is to know." He took young Merlin's hand in his. "Come along to the quay head," he said eagerly. "Maybe having give ye permission to tell me, they will wait by the quay that I may have the chance of seeing her." The hope was vain. When they got to the quay and looked in, there was nothing to be seen except the fishing fleet riding on the dark, still water in its safe anchorage. "And she was down here by father's boat only 10 minutes or so ago, burning like moon away there," cried young Merlin, gazing out toward the sea. "And now she is nowhere to be seen. 'Tis queer, sure enough. There is something or other glowing like a live coal on the horizon," said the old man, also gazing seaward where the moon was ripping the water. "Is it a star low down on the sea, or is it the dinky longboat and the 9 little merry men going back home?" It was a question young Merlin could not answer, and neither he nor the old fisherman was ever sure what the nature of that soft glow on the water's edge was. As they turned away from the quay, the wind blowing in from the open sea brought with it the sound of voices singing was far away. The boy, listening with all his ears, thought he heard the last lines of the little merry men's song. "With a dally-rally-o, with a rally-dally-o, in their longboat-o." All Mevagissey was in a ferment of excitement the next morning when young Merlin's story was noised about. Some believed it and some did not. Others declared that he had dreamed it all. "True or not true, time will tell," said the old Merlin laconically. "But if it be true the Bucca's 9 little merry men and their dinky longboat have been in the rock pool, and that my dear grandson and namesake saw her with his own eyes and brought he inside our quay, then prosperity has come to us." If they laughed at the old man, as they had so often, he would nod and say, "You will all be wishing soon. 'Twas your eyes saw the little craft and your hands that brought her hither." Young Merlin's story was soon verified, for from the night that the lad declared the longboat and her crew had ridden safely on the water of Mevagissey harbour, prosperity came to the little fishing town, to its fisherfolk, and particularly to the house of Legasic, which flourished amazingly. If fish stayed away from the nets and lines of other Cornish fishermen, they did not from the fishermen of Mevagissey, and there was never any more need for anybody to go to bed with. "An empty stomach,"